This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopia's prime minister meets with African Union envoys and promises to protect civilians in Tigray. Rescue mission continues for dozens of miners trapped in Zimbabwe's mine collapse. And AstraZeneca promises to run a new series of test days after reports of varying efficacy rates. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. Motorcycle ride-hailing app Safe Border exits Kenya. And Tanzania airports and border points now fitted with ATM machines that can issue foreign currency. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. We begin in Ethiopia, where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says his government will protect civilians in the northern region of Tigray. He made the comment in a meeting with African Union envoys on Friday. But the statement issued after the meeting with former Presidents Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, Joachim Chissano of Mozambique, and Halime Moslante of South Africa made no mention of talks with regional forces. Abiy's comments comes a day after he announced the military was beginning the final phase of an offensive in Tigray. Federal and local troops have been fighting in the region since early November. Hundreds of people have been killed so far. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency reported that over 40,000 Ethiopians have crossed into neighboring Sudan to seek shelter. In a remote part of Sudan, one camp is already over capacity. Amrakoba camp was meant to house 5,000 refugees, but has almost doubled that capacity. The UN estimates that up to 200,000 people could arrive in Sudan over the next 6 months.
Catering for over 9,000 people in the camp, hot meal is a challenge. We cannot keep social distancing here in the camp. It is really challenging among the several issues in need that are growing because the number is growing. Today we are receiving a convoy of 1,000 arriving in the camp, and shelter is one of the biggest challenges that we have at the moment. This camp is almost 2 weeks old. It is challenging in Sudan because of fuel shortage, economic situation, and honestly, the partners, including UNHCR and our allies, including WFP and all of us, it is challenging us to provide, shelter materials, food, to get them quickly.
All right, let's get more perspective on this. Our reporter Gerun Chala is following the developments in Ethiopia. He now joins us live from Addis Ababa. Gerun, thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. The Prime Minister's office released a detailed brief about what the AU envoys were told in the meeting. Do we know if there were or will be any further engagements between the PM's office and the envoys between the envoys and the TPLF side?
Well, as expected, the African Union peace envoys to Ethiopia, nominated by the current chair of the union, Cyril Ramaphosa, also South African president, were here today. The Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was holding talks with them the whole day today. And as you said, according to the press statement from the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made the mission of law enforcement in this country against the TPLF, that's the regional party in the Tigray regional state, clear to these African Union envoys. He said that this mission is important for the country to return constitutionality back to that regional state and also to hold Ethiopia together by enforcing the law of the land. At the same time, the Prime Minister also expressed the precautionary measures that are being taken to avoid any civilian casualties, perhaps in the Mekelle city, as the operation is ongoing at the moment. And he also talked about the refugee situation of the country and the efforts of the government, as in providing shelter and security for people who are affected by this war, and also the preparation of several campsites, refugee sites, for the people who might be returning willingly back to the country from Sudan after they were evicted because of this war. Now, Richard, to answer your question, by the way, we know that this meeting was a one-day meeting. The Prime Minister made it clear to this African Union peace envoys that there won't be any negotiation that is going to be held at the moment directly with the TPLF, and unfortunately that's not going to happen in the near future until this mission is completed, as he said. But the Prime Minister promised he will be discussing with civic society from Tigray, any representative of the people, the elderly from Tigray, and also any legal party other than the TPLF. So discussions might be held, but not directly with TPLF, Richard.
All right, Gero, important points and statements that you've made there. But what about, well, talk more about the situation in Tigray and what the latest is from the offensive launched yesterday by the federal forces. Gero?
So what is called the final offensive, after the ultimatum of 72 hours to surrender was concluded, that mission is now close to 2 days. It has started as the Prime Minister ordered the Ethiopian National Defense Force to, quote-unquote, finish the job of law enforcement in Mekelle city. That's the stronghold, strategic location for the Special Force of Tigray and the militia, also the leadership there. So what we are hearing, although information is still scarce these days about that important mission, the Ethiopian National Defense Force are engaging with the Special Force there. They are also telling us several victories, small victories have been also gained through that. The Tigray regional state, still communication is out. There's no way of finding the leadership there, but we hear here and there unconfirmed information that there's also gaining some kind of victory on the ENDF itself. So war is ongoing. We don't really know when it's going to be concluded, but we know that it will continue even in the next few days, perhaps.
All right, Gero Nta speaking to us live from Addis Ababa. Gero, we appreciate your insights and bringing us up to speed with the latest going on in Tigray. Moving on to Zimbabwe, search and rescue operations have been underway for around 40 miners trapped underground at a mine in Bandura town, some 70 kilometers from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. 6 miners have so far been pulled out of the mine after it collapsed on Wednesday. CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya brings us the story from the capital.
The Ministry of Mines has mobilized its engineering department and equipment from large mining companies to carry out the search and rescue, but efforts are being slowed down by underground water and disrupted by other miners attempting to get into the shaft.
The dewatering exercises, we are aware that now it's rainy season, and that place actually, the levels that they're mining is a water table. Unfortunately, these illegal miners would want to continue doing operations because as of this morning, another set of 9 miners were rescued again from a different shaft that they entered while its rescue operations were occurring simultaneously on the other end. They were trying to enter the mine a different angle.
The rescue efforts highlight the challenges authorities face trying to regulate informal mining. Accidents of this nature are a common occurrence here because often these informal miners illegally encroach into abandoned and disused mine shafts that are no longer structurally sound. They do not adhere to the safety guidelines when they operate and often don't have the appropriate protective equipment, which means they often end in fatalities. Mining associations are engaging government to help curb accidents.
What we have been trying to lobby for the Ministry of Mines or government to do was to expedite the issue of formalization. Because once we formalize all these disused mines, the Ministry of Mines will actually look into it, the use it or lose it policy, the expropriation of mines that are not being utilized so that they are actually going to be put into proper use. Because as long as we are going to have illegal mining activities, these accidents are actually surging in the country.
2 other incidents of trapped miners have been reported during the month of November alone. Farai Mwakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
AstraZeneca, the pharmaceutical company working with Oxford University to develop a COVID vaccine, is promising to run a new series of tests. Just days after revealing their initial results from tests in the UK and Brazil, there are questions about the reported efficacy rates, which varied between 62 and 90%. This stems from an error made during the testing, which led to higher effectiveness rates. CGTN's Lola Abdafid reports.
Much of the UK government's economic optimism for 2021 rides on the back of a reasonably priced, effective knockout blow to COVID-19. This week's jubilation is now tempered, with AstraZeneca and Oxford University undertaking additional work on their potential vaccine. An error during testing led to half a dose being given initially, before a full dose a month later. But the error paid off. Researchers found that dose level resulted in the vaccine proving to be 90% effective in preventing COVID-19. But when 2 full doses were given in the same time frame, it had an efficacy rate of 62%.
I think we shouldn't be concerned or too puzzled by the fact that giving a small dose and then a bigger dose has a better effect than giving 2 large doses. The immune system behaves in very complicated ways in order to tolerate some things and yet react to others.
AstraZeneca is a multinational pharmaceutical company based in Cambridge. Its turnover last year was over $24 billion and has a portfolio of products for many major diseases. But questions are asked over its testing and the dosage error, something which also affected the value of its shares. That's forced AstraZeneca's chief executive to respond. Now that we've found, he says, what looks like a better efficacy, we have to validate this, so we need to do an additional study. AstraZeneca and its partner Oxford University promises the new research will be international. The UK government has reserved 100 million doses and has also bought about 40 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, enough for roughly a third of the UK population. Despite the recent concerns, it's pushing on with regulatory approval of the AstraZeneca jab. The UK Prime Minister, for one, is hoping new tests will lead to less confusion for economic and social reasons.
We now have reason to hope that by spring, community testing and vaccines will combine to end this era of restrictions. But to get there, we must first navigate a hard winter when the burden on our NHS is heaviest.
The race to provide an effective vaccine will enable the return to some kind of social normality and to stimulate economic growth. There are likely to be some who will be cautious about the safety of a vaccine after only a few months of testing. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, London.
The African Union is working with member states to coordinate the purchase and delivery of COVID-19 vaccines for when they become available and are approved. The World Health Organization says 3 vaccines are demonstrating high levels of efficacy. The World Bank has announced that it is offering $12 billion to assist the continent in vaccine acquisition. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi spoke to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Addis Ababa. Let's take a listen.
The light at the end of the COVID-19 tunnel is peeking through. Preliminary results from 3 vaccine candidates have shown incredible promise. But in Africa, there are concerns that citizens could be last in line after developed nations pre-ordered billions of doses. Being locked out would not only leave hundreds of millions vulnerable, but could have a wide-ranging impact on Africa's ability to recover and could lead to discrimination.
We are very concerned as a continent that once these vaccinations start in a developed world, there will be stringent conditions that says that you have to have a vaccine certificate in order to travel. And that will become, we've already seen some airlines indicating that once vaccines are available, they will need a vaccine certificate to travel.
The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the target is to immunize at least 60% of Africa's population. 3 contenders are being considered: the Moderna and the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines from the United States and the AstraZeneca jab from the United Kingdom. Preliminary data from late-stage clinical trials has shown at least 90% efficacy in all of them. The African Union says it is in talks with the vaccine manufacturers through COVAX, a global initiative co-led by the World Health Organization to help ensure equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. But the Africa CDC says there are other challenges beyond just a vaccine being available. According to World Health Organization, 40 African countries are still not fully ready for vaccine acquisition.
We have to look at the delivery part of this and say, well, if a vaccine was here today, in Africa today, how we would deliver it? I think the first two vaccines, that is the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, require very stringent storage conditions. The Moderna vaccine requires about minus 20-something degrees Celsius storage and distribution. The Pfizer vaccine requires about minus 70. And these are all conditions that will make it very challenging for us as a continent to begin to access those vaccines in a timely fashion.
Apart from the COVAX initiative, which guarantees the continent 20% coverage for any vaccine produced, the AU has so far mobilized $12 million from the World Bank and $5 billion from the AFRICA Bank. With additional funds from individual member states, the AU aims to achieve the remaining 40% coverage required to keep the continent safe. In mid-December, the Africa CDC is meeting with all member states to discuss in detail, once vaccines are acquired, how there will be equitable distribution of the vaccines according to each country's needs. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Our coverage continues on Africa Live. Time now for a short break. Here's what's coming up. Expatriates from around the world to benefit from new labor laws in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And discovery of a 2-million-year-old skull promises new insights into human evolution.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Well, in recent weeks, both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have announced plans that would change the working environments for expatriates. Saudi Arabia is considering a change in its labor law that gives more control to employees, while the UAE is set to relax a number of laws that impact living standards. Jacob Greaves reports.
Right now in Saudi Arabia, foreign workers can't switch jobs or even leave the country without their employer's permission. But Riyadh says that's going to change, with plans to ease contractual restrictions in a bid to lure more talent to the country. Meanwhile, in the UAE, conservative Islamic laws are set to be overturned, allowing expats to drink alcohol without a licence and unmarried couples to live together.
It's no coincidence that we're seeing these measures announced now, because obviously they reflect the economic challenges that Saudi Arabia and the UAE have faced in the last few years that have been exacerbated by COVID, and a realisation that the private sector has to flourish, and that part of that story is going to be obviously expats living here, being happy living here, wanting to stay, and obviously foreign direct investment into the country.
The changes in the UAE are also expected to include tougher punishment for honour killings, whilst divorce or inheritance will be settled by an expat's home nation's law rather than local Sharia courts.
It comes amid warnings from the IMF that the UAE economy could shrink by 6.6% this year, and amid concern of an expat exodus, a grouping that makes up over 85% of the population here.
Some prominent Emiratis have gone on record as saying that they might expect to see the population shrink by, almost double-digit levels this year. We wouldn't necessarily think it's that extreme.
For the more conservative Saudi Arabia, the labour law changes could be comprehensive, giving more power to employees to choose their job and, as a result, incentivising companies to improve working conditions.
you move away from your traditional labor-intensive, low-wage, low-skilled, semi-skilled business models that have been very dominant in the region, mainly, but in Saudi also a lot. The fact that the workers retain now the ability to make their own choices and pursue better employment opportunities is going to change the dynamics of the relationship between the employer and the worker totally.
But these changes won't begin until March 2021. Even then, they're largely bringing Saudi Arabia up to speed with other Gulf countries such as Bahrain and the UAE. The region relies on a low-income migrant workforce in sectors such as construction. Rights groups have consistently raised concern about their treatment, particularly amid the financial impact of COVID-19.
The degree that these moves improve Saudi Arabia's reputation on this front and also attract new workers to the country depends in large part on how these changes are implemented in practice. There are still a number of informal methods that can be used to take advantage of vulnerable workers. This happens in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf, and indeed across the globe.
For the Gulf's two largest economies, a legacy of COVID-19 could also be improved conditions for foreign workers. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
In Libya, efforts are continuing to implement the latest ceasefire deal agreed upon by warring factions in the country. An election date has been set for the end of next year. However, forces on the front lines are yet to back down.
So far, the latest ceasefire in Libya is holding, and some elements of the truce have been implemented. Flights between rival cities of Tripoli and Benghazi have resumed, and foreign fighters have left oil facilities, the keys to the country's economy. But meetings of the Joint Military Commission in northern Libya have yet to make progress on other key demands of a UN-brokered agreement.
There are no clear solutions to achieve a reasonable agreement. These divisions that we see today, even in the political dialogue held by the United Nations in Tunisia. There are many who left the meeting in opposition of the dialogue, saying that they did not represent their ambitions in relation to the views on the necessary removal of the existing political bodies, citing they do not have the right to participate in such negotiations toward a new transition period, and that those in opposition believe it is necessary to return decision-making to the people and move directly towards an election.
Rival factions have yet to withdraw troops from frontline positions, open a major coastal road linking Sirte to Misrata, and rid their ranks of foreign mercenaries.
We support this agreement in Tunisia, but this agreement outlines the withdrawal of all armed groups from Sirte and Jufra, and only then will the roads be reopened. The agreement does not mention that the roads will be reopened and then the forces will withdraw. Therefore, we request that the agreement be implemented fast, which is the withdrawal of all forces in the central military region, specifically in Sirte and in Jufra, and the treatment of our wounded soldiers, the men who defended this area and held back these forces.
The UN-led diplomatic effort has set a roadmap to elections at the end of next year and implemented an audit of the central bank, which is split between the sides. However, a unified transitional government that will oversee the vote is yet to be set up.
The elections are contingent on two things. Firstly, Libya must have one government that will unite all political factions. And secondly, the elections in Libya need an all-encompassing reconciliation so that Libyans forget the past. For the election to go ahead, it needs a full reconciliation and a unified government that must study it in its entirety, even if it takes 2 years. But they must come out with a result.
The UN process helped resolve an 8-month Libyan National Army blockade of oil exports, which aggravated economic problems in the country. The third strand of talks beyond the military commission and the political process is economic negotiations. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN.
There's been much excitement in South Africa around the discovery of a skull belonging to a species that lived around the same time as ancient humans. The cranium was found at the Cradle of Humankind, which is a World Heritage Site. It could provide many critical answers to existence and how modern humans came about. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
A 2-million-year-old skull unearthed in South Africa throws new light on human evolution. DNH 155 was found at the Cradle of Humankind's Dremelin Caves, which has the richest concentration of hominid fossils.
We were lucky enough to discover a beautiful cranium of, or the whole face and skull of a beautiful species called Paranthropus robustus. They're an ancient cousin of ours, and they're known for having these massive big teeth and this big flat face. And specifically, and quite unique to them, is the sagittal crest, or this big ridge of bone that goes down the back of their skull.
Paranthropus robustus survived and adapted to harsh climatic change, which went from extremely wet to drier conditions like we see in southern Africa today.
They do go extinct, but before they do that, they become very specialized. And they use those big teeth and these big faces to chew on really hard, fibrous foodstuffs. But what's fascinating is at Dremelin now, what we've been able to discover with DNH 155 is that actually they weren't able to chew on those hard food things initially, but then in a very, very short period of time during the climate shifting, they're able to develop those really quickly.
The hominid lived alongside ancient human ancestor Homo erectus for around 1 million years before dying out.
So we discovered Homo erectus. Well, we discovered it quite early, but we announced it earlier this year. So that was quite interesting because it's at the same site and the same time, but it's Homo, so it's related to us. And Homo erectus is the species that leaves Africa and goes on to populate the rest of the planet. So that's the next fascinating step in the study, is kind of understanding how these different human-like creatures pass out a landscape and who feeds on what and how did they potentially interact.
This has been one of the most significant discoveries to come out of the Cradle of Humankind. It's being described as the missing piece of the puzzle between modern humans and their predecessors. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
America is reeling from a hotly contested presidential election, one which has been keenly observed across the world, with a change in administration potentially meaning significant shifts in U.S. foreign policy. Analysts in Africa have been keeping an eye on possible implications for the continent. In this week's episode of Dimensions, Beatrice Marshall brings us an assessment of the U.S. election, its foreign policy, and Africa.
Can a change of guard at the White House herald a U.S. foreign policy shift in Africa? Within the backdrop of perhaps the most divisive presidential election in the country's history, the U.S. may find it critical to repackage itself in order to once again differently project itself globally. And it could all boil down to how it chooses to use its soft and hard power. Billed, and rightly so, as an epic battle for the soul of America, the election has served as the sternest test for democracy. In Africa, the U.S. may shortly begin to grapple with the unenviable task of restoring trust in democracy, for years a key plank of its policy on the continent. Its commitment to ideals such as justice, human rights, democracy, and good governance may also come under increased scrutiny. A concept with mixed outcomes, democracy is still largely a work in progress on the continent. While the U.S. has strived to help integrate Africa in the global economy, build its capacity to deal with security threats, strengthen healthcare, and invigorate youth engagement, its ubiquitous footprint on the continent has served to counter the positive influence of other countries. This policy and its rigid nature has exposed gaps other countries have had to step in to fill: agriculture, trade, infrastructural development, energy, foreign direct investment, ICT, to name just a few sectors. And these players have done so more as a way of complementing America's role and not to compete with its interests in Africa. But is a U.S.-Africa policy change likely?
Perhaps a wait-and-see posture would suffice for now. A walk down memory lane shows a consistent path since the post-Cold War era. Republicans or Democrats, it's hardly ever mattered who's running the show in Washington, D.C. A congressional bipartisan around African issues and entrenched institutionalized bureaucracies have underpinned and perpetuated this policy outlook. A split Congress and Senate will make dramatic policy changes even more unlikely. The hope that the incoming administration will be more responsive to Africa's needs and allocate more resources to the continent is possibly rooted in the belief that Democrats are more responsive to African interests. It is also worth noting that each American president has had their own signature Africa projects, from AGOA to Power Africa to President Trump's Prosper Africa. A conservative approach along these policy areas will likely persist. Perhaps the greatest hope for Africa will come from the way America engages globally and its trickle-down effect. Right now, the world is watching and is looking forward to an end to the US's zero-sum policy of America first and a quick return to the more inclusive win-win doctrine of multilateralism and globalization. Faced with existential threats, humanity is waiting with bated breath for viable solutions to a plethora of challenges, the most urgent one being the global COVID-19 pandemic.
And time now for the latest in business news with Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Motorcycle ride-hailing app SafeBorder exits Kenya. And Tanzania airports and border points now fitted with ATM machines that can issue a foreign currency.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Now, the Ugandan ride-hailing startup SafeBorder has closed operations in Kenya, citing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. SafeBorder connects passengers to motorcycle riders through a mobile app. The app began in Uganda before spreading to Kenya and Nigeria in 2018. Here's Isabel Nakiria reporting.
SafeBorder has pulled out of the motorcycle taxi market in Kenya. The company says the coronavirus hit hard at a time when it was struggling to expand. Apart from ride-hailing, SafeBorder was also connecting users to other online platforms like online markets, food delivery services, and financial transactions like airtime purchases.
A product like SafeBorder depends on a lot of funds and a lot of raising of funds. Had to go through a very difficult situation because not every investor is willing to invest during this difficult moment. So we had to pull in because we didn't have, to be honest with you, we didn't have all the finances to continue running the company.
Kenya started easing lockdown measures about 4 months ago, but the movement of people remained low due to fears of catching COVID-19.
Around 4,000 motorcycle taxi drivers in Kenya have lost jobs following safe border pullout, and many of them had lost incomes during the lockdown and were struggling to cope.
Safe Border says it could not sustain the business because the market environment was uncertain, posing threats to its operations in Uganda and Nigeria. Kenya's economy is one of the fastest growing in East Africa. Safe Border says it enjoyed the competitiveness of the market and learned lessons.
It's a very difficult decision that we had to make, but we had to make it to be able to save Safe Border, because the economy is real tough, the situation is real tough. A lot of movement of people have been reduced. You know, when people are not going to churches, when people are not going to bars, when people are not going to school and stuff like this, you get to realize when people are now working from home and all meetings are happening from Zoom, you get to realize that movement of people is very, very limited. That means our business transaction will always continue to be low.
The pandemic has sparked many innovations, and tech entrepreneurs say the only way to stay in business is to learn to be creative.
We have to look into things around digital transformation. We need to skill as many youth as possible, equip them with the necessary digital skills and tools that they'll need to be competitive moving forward. We need to address challenges around access to necessary training on business development.
For now, Safe Border will focus business in Uganda and Nigeria as it strategizes on whether it will return to Kenya when things improve. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Now, with the ride-hailing app Safe Border pulling out of Kenya, it has rendered hundreds jobless in the country, including call center operators. Meanwhile, thousands of motorcycle riders registered on the platform will have to seek work elsewhere. Here's CGTN's Enoch Sikolia reporting from Nairobi.
Across Nairobi, one cannot fail to spot a motorcycle taxi donning an orange reflector jacket and matching helmet. But a few months from now, these flashes of orange with a Safe Border logo may be a rare sight. The motorcycle hailing app has exited the Kenyan market. Walter Obinya joined the app when it expanded to Kenya in 2018. He recalls a bonus structure in place in the early days.
Whenever you rendered services to 3 people in a day, you would earn a bonus of $3. 5 people, you would get $5, and if you ferried 10 people, you get $10.
Obinya says anyone joining the app was taken through thorough safety and customer care training. Riders were kitted out with reflector jackets and helmets for themselves and their customers. He says that focus on safety endeared them to customers.
Many people would come to the stage looking for anyone with Safe Border helmet. He or she would then make a request specifically targeted at you.
Safe Border said the decision to exit Kenya was due to the effect of the coronavirus pandemic, but riders from Kenya dispute that reason. Many say the app was struggling even before the pandemic struck, facing off with competitors like Uber and Bolt.
They started reducing rates for fares, and so riders started leaving the app, and they never listened to our plight. Despite our complaints and protests, the money we were getting became little as the app sought to make clients happy at our expense.
In recent years, border borders have become a popular mode of transport in Kenya. At the same time, it has provided employment opportunities for young Kenyans, and the hole left behind by Safe Border in the industry will hopefully be quickly filled. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's head to Tanzania now. The country's airports and border entry points will now issue foreign currency after being fitted with new compatible ATM machines. The currency exchange ATM machine, introduced by NMB Bank, is a new development in the country's forex dealings. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with the details.
For the first time ever,
Travelers to and from Tanzania can now exchange euros, dollars, or pounds at the country's 3 main international airports, thanks to the new automated telemachine service launched in Dar es Salaam.
This service has given us a solution to access forex easily, especially after the closure of forex bureaus in the country. The government, through the Central Bank of Tanzania, had asked commercial banks to help ensure forex services are easily available.
The ATM machines are being fixed at the Julius Nyerere International Airport, the Kilimanjaro International Airport, and the Amani Karume International Airport in Zanzibar. In 2019, the central bank cracked down on irregularities in the foreign exchange sector, which among other things led to a number of bureau de change operations being suspended and the subsequent passing of the Foreign Exchange Bureau de Change regulations of 2019. The central bank says the closure of bureaus in 2019 has helped resolve problems of tax evasion, money laundering, and other illegal transactions, and they believe foreign exchange services over the ATM will increase convenience and safety.
Sometimes you need money and banks are closed and you may struggle, but with a machine like this one, you can serve yourself in safety.
For now, the ATM machines will be limited to only 3 international currencies: the US dollars, the euro and pound sterling, and the local Tanzanian shilling.
We are mainly going to concentrate within the main airports. But then again, as the usage, as we see an uptick, of course, we will then deploy into all other strategic, like tourist areas and even shopping malls. Who knows?
Customers will exchange up to $2,000 at a given time. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And in Zimbabwe, the government has begun repossessing underutilized farms and withdrawing land from multiple farm owners as it aims to enhance food security in the country. Now, this follows a government plan to implement the one-man, one-farm policy that seeks to ensure landless Zimbabweans can be allocated land. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya with more on that report.
Vast swaths of farmland parceled out to beneficiaries during the 2000s have been lying idle, reducing agricultural production and diminishing the important sector's contribution to the economy. The government has begun repossessing those farms from unproductive, absentee or multiple owners and will allocate them to thousands of people on a lengthy waiting list at the land's office.
If it is done in the sense and in the light of trying to improve food security or improve production, then the process is viewed as a very noble one by our organization, and we are fully behind such a development. There has to be some rethinking in terms of how we can make the land more productive. And even if it means revisiting some of the processes, so be it, because what we need to do is to ensure that land becomes productive.
Agricultural production has been hampered since 2000 due to contestations over the land grabs, which has seen some resettled farmers failing to access crucial finance. Farmers who are constrained by a lack of capital are allowed to engage in joint ventures with investors to get their operations up and running. However, in new guidelines issued by government, those sort of partnerships now need to be approved by the Ministry of Agriculture. Stakeholders insist the reallocation must be backed by attractive investment policies.
If you do not provide the environment, policy and otherwise, if you don't provide that environment for environment which is conducive for production and productivity to kick in, you then end up having these reverse issues, the negatives, where land lies idle, where people grab land from each other, disputes all over, and also you have a limit to which you can finance your operations, be it at the government level or even at an individual level. with the security on the farms in question, even mobilizing local investment becomes quite a challenge.
To try to improve efficiency, Zimbabwe has also put a limit on farm sizes, and in July it agreed to pay $3.5 billion to former white farmers as compensation for infrastructure improvements on the land as part of efforts to win back international support. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And in Senegal, a digital forum is currently underway in its capital, Dakar. The two-day event is seen as a platform for promoting innovative technological solutions. It also looks to encourage and aid innovative young people. Now, 3 young Senegalese were recognized as innovative problem solvers. The event brings together hundreds of digital experts from the country. It is organized by the Ministry of Digital Economy and Telecoms, chaired by Senegalese President Macky Sall.
Facing the pandemic and its impacts, the best of digital technology has manifested itself by supporting health, education, and many other activities, in particular through teleworking. This also illustrates the relevance of the theme of this edition: digital technology in the service of pandemic management and economic recovery.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Zimbabwe pursues local procurement to kickstart its economy in 2021. We'll get reactions on Finance Minister Mthuli Nkube's Thursday budget. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. The news continues here on Africa Live. So much more coming your way. Stay tuned. Don't go away.
Every summer, the world's biggest canoe race paddles through the Valley of 1,000 Hills. Traditionally, this race, the Duzi Canoe Marathon, has been dominated by athletes from outside of this valley. But recently, that has all changed.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks for your company. Well, Nigeria has launched a blog called COVID-19 Nigerian Stories to record the country's experience and response to the pandemic. Authorities say it could help in applying the lessons learned to future public health emergencies. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
The COVID-19 Nigeria stories are compiled and told right here at the National Center for Disease Control. It's the brainchild of the agency's boss, Chikwe Ihekwazu. It's at the core of the agency's plan to preserve all the stories, battles, and the victories recorded throughout the pandemic. The blog also serves as a reminder that behind the statistics are real people.
We thought it was important to develop a platform where a select number of people have stories of their experience during the outbreak and share that with the world. And that's really what motivated the development of this blog. We really want to achieve a scenario where the connection between people and what has happened is kept and preserved forever. And that people find a space where they can connect in a lot deeper way with what has happened.
The platform features stories about health workers, community response activities, and more. The blog hopes the stories will help people to emotionally connect with the present realities, as many Nigerians still doubt that the virus exists, and accessing those who are willing to tell their stories has been a daunting task.
Perhaps one of the biggest challenges we face is that of stigmatization and people coming out to tell their stories
You know, the COVID-19 was an unprecedented outbreak. We saw what we had never seen before. The virus spread rapidly. Some people had negative perception about the virus, you know, and a lot of them were stigmatized as well, including health workers.
The Nigeria CDC is working with implementing partner Nigeria Health Watch and supported by the Ford Foundation. There's been no official launch yet, but the blog is currently running on the agency's website and it's accessible to members of the public. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And we're not done